Well, now that I have a cane, I think there's only one appropriate hat wear for this choice. Fantastic. Reptile breeding. It's the dream for so many people to make money doing what you love, keeping animals. Whether you are the guy just raising up a pair to hopefully one day produce babies, or you're the dude with a couple going with the dreams of being a full-time reptile breeder, the dream's gonna be the same. You wanna force two animals to do it, take their babies, and sell them off in the market for profit. Doesn't sound that good when you say it like that. Through my short decade of keeping and breeding reptiles, I have definitely seen some crazy myths and just misrepresentation when it comes to reptile breeding, which is exactly what we're going to be talking about today, separating the myth versus reality of reptile breeding. Let's get into it. Things off, let's start with a myth that I thought has already been abolished. I didn't think people still actually believed this, but recently I saw a clip that made me second guess that, and that is going to be myth number one. It is a get quick rich thing. Or I'm wearing a top hat and a shirt with holes in it because I'm rich and I got rich fast. This one I would say is a oldie but a goldie. A myth that still to this day seems to keep going, that you can get rich fast, shove some money into reptiles and boom, quick profits and you're good to go. Like I mentioned, I didn't think this thing was still around. I thought people knew better by now. Is the fact that, well, you don't get rich doing this. You definitely don't get rich fast. However, watching a financial podcast, Caleb Hammer, I'll show the clip here, I learned that is not the case.
Show Chi-Chi's?
I know, what are you saying, mate?
I purchased ball pythons in the intention of breeding and selling.
What the f are you even on? What?
He's very invested into the ball python industry. He's got a decent.
Who the f is buying ball python? So really, it's like a ball python pyramid scheme. You get breeded pythons so that you convince other fucking ball python potential breeders to make more money. You just sell them. You breed and sell to them so that they can breed and sell to other people. It's a fucking ball python pyramid.
Yeah.
Two biggest things I took away from that is, number one, Jesus Christ, just within like 15 seconds of learning about the ball python trade from a guy that has no idea about reptiles, he realized that yes, the ball python is a multi-leveling marketing scheme. Second thing I thought is, you were trying to get rich breeding ball pythons, but you only shoved $7,000 in it? Brother, maybe in 2012, you gotta put at least 20 grand if you want to make money, don't you know? The reality of breeding reptiles is there is a multitude of overhead costs that come into breeding it, and it really depends on what reptiles you are. Ball pythons are an awful example because their overhead is so high. You have to buy the freezing rodents, the frozen rodents, then you have to do live for some of the picky ones. Newborns usually don't take frozen, so you gotta get live. That's more expensive. Raise them up. Their clutch sizes aren't nearly as big, so you have to spend a lot of money to try to get the big morph, but then you're playing the lottery of the morphs, and then all of a sudden this $10,000 ball python combo you bought diminished 75% in the 2 years it took for you to grow out, and all of a sudden you now make like a quarter of what you spent on this animal. A lot of different factors. Factors play into breeding reptiles. The initial cost only starts at buying the reptile you plan to breed or the pair that you plan to breed. Housing, food costs, electricity, and then of course the best one, the lovely market. This year and last year's it's getting a little better. Last year's a great example of the market crashing, and all of a sudden all the money you sunk into breeding reptiles has become a fraction of what they used to be worth. So yes, you can make money doing this. You can build up a reputable business, get your collection going stronger and better, reducing good morphs, creating new morphs, so on and so forth, and there is a way you can make money. That way just is not the fast way. You probably make more money faster starting any other business than working with living animals. That's just the gist of the matter. But moving on, let's get into number two, and that's going to be reptile breeding is easy. I can definitely see this being a thought for so many people. They're listing on Morph Market, they're at the Reptile Expo seeing the tables, seeing the beautiful price tags on all these animals. $1,200, $18,000. In 2024, $65. And they get a little glim in their eye. They're like, hey, I own a leopard gecko. Hey, I own a lychee gecko. I can easily just breed it and make this much money. That's absolutely incredible. This seems like it's pretty easy work. Right now, I've bred quite a few species in my life. None of them have been very easy. Difficulties or non-easiness, I hope that is a word, of where your difficulties are going to come into breeding reptiles is going to be solely dependent on what species you are doing. Pretty much a double-edged sword, right? Now, if you were going to breed stuff that has a bunch of different information available, a bunch of YouTube videos available, pretty much to the fact where anyone can breed that species, we're talking, leopard geckos, crested geckos, ball pythons, corns, kings, everything like that, then your difficulties are not going to come with the breeding themselves. Species that I mentioned seem to breed pretty easily, and you can incubate the eggs pretty easily, they hatch out pretty easily. Probably thinking to yourself right now, well, Dakota, that sounds pretty easy. Then you get into the second part, that double-edged sword I had mentioned earlier. The second part, the first part comes to breeding the animals, reproducing them, getting babies. Then you get to the hard part. Selling those babies. Like I mentioned earlier, anyone can breed those species, so you know what ends up happening? Everybody breeds those species. That means an oversaturated market of thousands to potentially, well, we're talking about ball pythons, tens to thousands of animals listed. Now, boys and girls, how is your 7 ball pythons, crested geckos gonna fit into a sea of thousands of animals? Going to a reptile show, you were gonna vend that bad boy and sell those animals? Well, guess what? There are hundreds of the same animal at that exact table with people that have a bigger reputation than you, people that are bigger in the hobby than you, and people that probably have cheaper prices than you. I don't know. Put that third finger up, so I had to come up with something, and it was, off the top of my head? I don't know the phrasing. In this type of situation, the best thing you can do is build your business up, get your name out there, try to perfect a certain niche of that specific species. Ball pythons make the best pieds, make the best albinos. Crested geckos, get a lily white that has full coverage. Make those high white walls paper white as you can get it. So on and so forth. Now, what usually happens is people just breed whatever they breed because it's what they have. You should go to Petco or they find Craigslist or whatever. They breed the animals, they get subpar animals, and then they don't know what to do with them because they're not selling, and so they sell them at the cheapest possible price, which then hurts the market for everybody. Because for anyone that just wants a crested gecko, my crested geckos now have to compete with Jimmy's geckos that he's listed for $15. Jimmy's fictional, I'm not going after anyone named Jimmy. More into that on number 3. Now we gotta get to the double-edged of the double-edged blade. Thinking to yourself, okay, Dakota, I understand, I got it. Don't breed crusty, don't breed saturated market. I'll get something that has a lot lower of a cost. I'll get into tokay geckos. I don't mind getting bit a couple of times. This one was actually a lychee. I'll do lychee geckos. Everyone loves lychees, it'll all work out in the end. But yes, you will have a much easier time selling in a space where only you're competing with 50 animals versus 50,000 animals. However, the difficulties then flip back. It's the opposite. Easy selling, difficult breeding. And this is very species specific, right? Biggest things you're gonna run into are going to be, number 1, depending on the species, the lack of information that is out there, because if there was a lot of information and people liked that thing, more people to be doing it. Number 2 is going to be the difficulty getting the animals to breed themselves. Now, while it does look nice and easy, moving all these lychees and tokays, fact of the matter is things can go wrong. Personal pair of lychees I've had to pull because they started going at each other. I had to rehab the female for having a pretty large bite on her head that then needed rehab and ended up scarring over, and everything was okay. Hell, I've had gargoyles scalp each other and had to do 6 months of rehab for that girl to make sure she was okay. She ended up pulling through, but the fact of the matter is stuff goes wrong. To tokay geckos, where you finally have spent thousands of dollars on this morph and you want to make this combo now, and you put them together, and then 7 months later, man, they just don't do anything for you because the pair needs to bond in order to produce eggs, and those geckos just don't end up liking each other. You get females that eat their eggs, you can get animals that just keep laying you bad duds. My chihuahuas have dudded out on me for 2 years straight now. A lot of different variables go into, and while yes, it is easier selling these species, the fact is it's harder to get viable eggs, get the babies going, hatching out the babies, and just starting to get it going. So no, reptile breeding, not easy. Depending on the species, you're gonna run into hardships on one front or the other, but the fact of the matter is, you gotta be passionate about the species. You can't come in here thinking it's gonna be easy money, because I had to choose reptiles. That's what I love. I love reptiles, and now here I am, in a cane, wearing a top hat for a YouTube video so I can sell some cresteds. DakotaBlueExotics.com. Finally, boys and girls, let's get into the last topic at hand, which isn't necessarily a myth, but a mindset, a philosophy, if you will. Of course, a YouTuber is going to virtue signal you on, and that's going to be how we breed these animals. I have to listen to me, I'm wearing a top hat. Personally, I think a big thing that you should think about before getting into the reptile breeding game and going into it is going to be how you go into it. Much better way to build your business up and not be just like everyone else is not doing what everyone else does. And this the hard way. I did the same thing every crested gecko person does. You know, I did the tubs and they just kind of kept getting worse and worse, but the animals kept getting better and better. But you showcase them in these crappy, dingy little tubs like everyone else, and you're just another guy. At this point in time, with the way the market is, there will always be a bigger guy. There will always be a guy with more money that can get better morphs than you, better lineage, better structured animals than you, so on and so forth. So a way I think the small guy can distribute himself is starting fresh, starting with nice enclosures. Don't put them in the tubs. Get nice PVC. Zen Habitat affiliate link. What's the weirdest thing I think about in the reptile hobby is we have this weird I'm so sorry. We have this weird double standard where the reptiles that you're keeping as a pet needs to be put in a certain parameter, and when you're not, God, you get flamed in those Facebook groups. However, the breeders, the people that are making money off their animals, are given a different set of rules where they can put their animals in lesser quality. Never really made sense to me. But I did it. I did it for years. I didn't get very far doing it, and at this point, 2023, whenever I decided Project Jungle, that's when I switched my mindset and we started doing stuff like all of that around the corner and so forth. You still have the old remnants of our ways with the rack systems and so on and so forth, but we will slowly but surely change the way we're doing. I think literally my new cow is the only species left that I haven't turned into enclosures and just still keep in tubs. More and more laws are passed down and our circle becomes less and less of what we can own because of what other people do. The fact of the matter becomes, I truly believe that representation should be a big factor in how you do things. Because if you're the average guy coming in on this, you know, you don't really know much about reptiles, whatever, you know, you're just the average dude and all of a sudden this big case comes out and you start looking into it. The Reptile King's going to be a great example when that documentary comes out. You're going to see a lot of breeders using rack systems, little drawers that these people are going to see. They're going to see drawers that these snakes can barely move in. Now, what would be a better representation? An entire warehouse full of drawers dimly lit with snakes in them, or something like this, a wall of enclosures with live plants to create a jungle for the species that you're making money off of. The public would view us in a much better light if they saw this versus what usually becomes. I'd like to see the reptile breeding hobby go into that direction. Stop focusing so much on how you can spend so much money on the animal and how cheaply you can house it, but have a symbiotic relationship with that. It creates better representation in the hobby. It creates more people wanting to get into it because they see how cool the animal is and in the enclosure. And number 3, you're gonna feel better about it. Where before Project Jungle, man, I didn't really care about this and how I was doing it. It just kept getting worse and worse. I just didn't like it. But by God, man, the Project Jungle, the bioactive enclosures, that shit reignited my spark and my passion for the hobby. And I feel like I have such a better love for these animals now because they're in really cool enclosures. Each enclosure being hand-built by me with the sole purpose of how cool I can make this for that specific animal. There you have it, boys and girls. Top Hat YouTuber does tangent after tangent for silly things that you wasted 10 minutes on. Congratulations. If you guys want to see some more tangents like this, go ahead and you leave a comment and I'll do it. Here is a playlist and a video of some awesome other videos that I've done. Or awful videos, depending on your perspective of me. Always thank you so much for taking the time of your day to follow us over here at Dakota Blue Exotics. I will see you guys next time, but until then, goodbye.